Drop is now out. Let's talk about it.
First date jitters.
No, you're killing it.
Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Before I get into this review, make sure to leave a like as it is free to do so, but I do apologize about this review getting up a little bit late as I saw this movie last Monday at the Regal Mystery Movie, and I always do suggest that you go out and see those mystery movies. AMC does it, Cinemark does it, Regal does it. It's always, on a random Monday. Sometimes I have it, 3 Mondays a month, sometimes 4, sometimes only once a month, but it's usually only $5 a ticket, and it's always a movie that's not out yet. So you get to see a mystery early screening. And this time it was for Drop, and I hated the trailers for Drop because I saw it so many times as I walked in the theater watching the Drop trailer. It's always the buzz buzz buzz, and I'm like, I'm tired of that noise. So I really went into this not expecting much, and when I left the theater after it was done, I mostly didn't care about it, but I also didn't hate it like I expected I would. Even though I wasn't excited to see this movie, the premise of Drop is still pretty strong, as it's one of those movies that primarily takes place at one location. I'm a huge fan of those types of movies. You have a lot of classics back in like the 1970s, the 80s and all that. They all took place at one location. And then, once we got into the 2000s, 2010s, now into the 2020s, not a lot of movies still do that same premise because a lot of people, have short attention spans. Mostly people, my age, they're on the TikTok and all that. They like, fast cutting movies. But I do appreciate movies that take place in one location and movies that do it pretty well. And this one actually takes place at a restaurant that is like hundreds of feet in the air. And even though I don't want to tarnish Alfred Hitchcock's name, I did find this type of thriller to be taking some notes from his films as it plays with some of the same tropes. So it basically is kind of a modern Hitchcockian thriller, but it's laced with a rom-com twist, which then makes this like a perfect date night movie. So if you and your partner want a simple but effective thriller and a pretty decent movie, I'd say, I think a lot of people will like this more than me. Some critics that I've talked to have liked it more than me. So if you want a pretty decent movie with your date or your, wife or husband, whoever's watching this will be a nice option, especially on Discount Tuesday, as it's cheaper and this movie is only about an hour and 40 minutes long. What sets this one apart from other thrillers that have been coming out recently is that it has a real tech-infused approach, with our main character Violet being sent drops, which are basically airdrops, but this movie can't say that because I think they'd have to pay Apple a pretty hefty amount to say that. But drops are basically airdrops for Apple. You send a thing out into the airdrop, people can accept that message or decline it. But in the movie, right here, the drops kind of start with slight fun, and they're kind of just being like memes and jokes sent to her when she's at this restaurant, but it slowly turns into like real threats against her family, her sister, her son. These drops actually added a lot to how the stories played out and how the movie shows these communications through technology actually seemed pretty realistic. I was a little bit worried about the drops because I thought that it was just going to be kind of cringy and be like, oh no, this could never happen. But I do understand it. I do understand where they're coming from. And I think it does take a pretty realistic approach, even though it gets kind of, not as realistic to the end. But I thought the drop aspect did make this one just a little bit better than other thrillers that have been coming out recently. Also, the situation is not only stressful because the drop's being sent, but it's also because Violet is a widow and this is her first day, first time going out in a long time. She just has a kid at home. She has to get her sister to babysit her kid. So she's kind of worried about her kid. She's worried about going on a first date in a long time. She has the, let's just say, first date jitters. So she's very nervous, but then she starts getting the drop. So she's like, one stressful thing leads to another. And then what's interesting, she becomes basically her own detective because the person behind the drops is like, you can't tell anyone about what's going on. So she has to find out who's doing these things, has to find a way around it. There's lots of different people in the restaurant. Who could it be? Could it be the younger people? Could it be the older people? Could it be the middle-aged people? You never really know. It's just fun seeing her become the detective here. This was directed by Christopher Landon, who has had some hits recently with the 2 Happy Death Day movies and Freaky, which are all movies that I enjoy a lot, especially Freaky. I think Freaky is my favorite from him, and they all contributed to making Blumhouse a much bigger name for horror before, sadly, that all went down the drain as Blumhouse really hasn't been that big recently. Blumhouse, we've all been looking at them releasing like a bunch of crap these last few years. I'd say the last 2 years, and I sadly think that this is one of Chris Christopher's weaker films, as it doesn't hit the same heights as his last ones. You know, he did for Blumhouse, and I think the big reason for that is that it's just not as fun, because Drop is playing into the more serious aspects of a thriller, but Happy Death Day and Freaky are more funny horror movies that don't take themselves too seriously. And even though I didn't think this movie was that great, I still think it is going to work better for a lot of other people, and I still got to give it to Blumhouse. Their movies are some of the most smartly budgeted movies today in this landscape. I mean, this one only had a budget of $10 million, so it should do pretty well at the box office. It should, you know, break even the first or maybe second weekend, and I think it will make some nice money for them. Most of my positives come from the first half of the movie and the way the technology was used. As I said, the drop aspect was really cool. I liked how they showed the text on screen, and I liked how the first half leans more into the Hitchcock thriller angles, and that part of it really worked for me. What didn't really work for me was when things started to get more explained and, you know, the drop person was revealed. I won't explain who it was because that is the biggest spoiler in the movie, but I overall just thought the third act was extremely rushed, and it makes you extend your disbelief pretty far, as there's a decent amount of plot holes and stuff that doesn't make much sense by the end of the movie. I will say though, Megan Fahey and Brendan Skolnar are a pretty good duo in this movie. They didn't really have to add that much chemistry because this is only their first date together. And what I found funny about this first date kind of movie is that, you know, any guy in real life would have left Megan Fahey in an instant, because what she's doing in this movie, you know, she has to become her own detective. So she is looking around the restaurant all the time. She's never focused on Brendan Skolnar, never asking him anything. And then she leaves the table like every 5 minutes, is seen talking to other guys around the restaurant. You know, if this was a realistic story, the guy would have left 10 minutes in, but thankfully Brendan Skolnar did not leave, because bad things would have happened if he left. But yeah, I really enjoy this duo in this movie. Overall, Drop didn't anger me as much as the trailers did, and I didn't really care for it, as I went in not really excited for it, but I also didn't hate it. I just thought it was extremely fine. Megan Fahey and Brendan Skolnar are what keeps this thriller together, as they nail some of the most stressful and sharper moments in the movie. And I also found the technological drop aspect of the movie to be quite interesting and well done, but where the movie struggles are in the second half execution, because the third act and ending are too rushed and not well thought out. I'm going to give Drop a low 6 out of 10. I hope you guys all did enjoy this review. Make sure to leave your own thoughts down in the comments if you did go see Drop. I know a lot of you probably like this movie a lot more than me. Maybe I'll give it another rewatch, you know, one of these days down the road. But also, if you enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.